Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Seven Sage Law School Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Baska, Seven Sage admissions consultant, podcaster, and blogger. And while we thank you for joining us, and we truly mean it today, though, because we are embarking on a new chapter for the pod, video. To our audience joining us on their fave audio streaming platform, we welcome you back as always. And for those of us joining us on YouTube and other video sites to be determined, I'm sorry you have to both hear me and see me, but that's just how the breaks go, guys. But on the note, joining me today is someone I actually see on a regular basis. Clayton Allen, who's one of the LSAT tutors here at Seven Sage, and Clayton and I do a Seven Sage live class every Wednesday that's in AMA format. So people attend, they log their questions, Clayton synthesizes the questions and then pitches them up to me, and then I answer away. But now here's the thing, though. Clayton is not only a Seven Sage employee, but Clayton, could you tell the good people in our audience a little bit about you and maybe why you're here today?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jake contacted me for the pod's first foray into video. They wanted to make sure they had a really handsome guest for their first episode, and then that guy canceled, so I'm here. And my status that makes me special is that I'm not just a tutor, I'm not just a class host, I'm also an applicant. I am somebody sending off applications this year to law schools across the country. Well, Jake, for today's episode, I went back and I reviewed the backlog of the show. I went back after I was invited on, and I went and I watched the episodes. And you've had on quite a broad swath of people in the admissions sphere, right? You've had on admissions deans, you've had on PhDs and JDs and what have you. You yourself were an admissions dean, and I think it's fitting to have on somebody whose sole qualification is that he doesn't know anything, and that my knowledge of the field, at least as we started out, was really minimal. Right.
So like a child entering the world, a blank slate, if you will. So the premise of today's episode is say what? Because Clayton has listened to me answer lots of questions about the law school admissions process. And for the most part, on a weekly basis, we get what I view to be pretty standard questions about admissions. Should I retake the LSAT? How do admissions officers look at a bad period on my transcript? How do I explain that? What's the purpose of a personal statement? Questions like that. And Clayton is also, he's a pretty bright guy, despite, exactly, I know, right? He's also done at least a little bit of research about the law school admissions process prior to joining me on these live classes. But as someone who's co-led these classes with me, there have probably been a few moments where I've answered a question and he's thought, say what? Come again? And these are things that I take for granted as common knowledge because I'm just so used to answering these questions. But from his standpoint, they're just revelatory. Okay. And they may be pretty radical to other applicants. So to that end, Clayton has prepped a couple of questions or topic areas to pitch here that fall squarely into that say what category for him. So Clayton, I know you have those questions and those topics. Feel free, fire away. I'm really curious. What apparently has caught you by surprise?
So structurally, I thought that, format wise, we might take it sort of in turn, discussing different parts of the application and the aspects of them that students were, and I will say students broadly, because there are certain things that I myself was terrified and confused about. But there are also things that a lot of students will come in. I mean, we get the same questions every week that the students are really, really shocked to hear certain answers on, or they have an intuition about something and it actually turns out to be something else. So I thought we might kind of go through those and maybe provide some value to the applicants that are listening who might have those questions, who might not have a chance. And then I will flag the ones here and there where I myself, storied journeyman of the application sphere that I am, was shocked and appalled in some cases, and just caught completely off guard. So I thought we might start with some of the kind of elements of an application. And the first one obviously is the statements. That is the thing that most students come to us with questions about. I feel it's like the number one question area
every week, especially earlier on. I feel we're now recording this in November. And by this point, I feel like we've gotten slightly past that, but especially August, September, as people are really ramping up. Yep.
Definitely. Right. I mean, people are faced with, like I'll say broadly, the process of applying to law schools is really unlike anything that at least I have ever done. And it is a kind of sui generis challenge that is not like the stuff you did in undergrad. It's really not like the stuff you did. Like, right, if you turn in a philosophy paper as your personal statement, they're lighting that thing on fire, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not supposed to structure it that way.
Mhm.
So the first thing that a lot of students are shocked about is the answer that you give when they ask about personal statements and they
Yep.
ask about what they're supposed to write about. Because I'll say the and this was my experience as an applicant, those personal statement prompts are vague and they're intentionally very vague. But like, you know,
Yeah. So the answer I usually give, and for frequent listeners, you probably heard me say this at some point, but like the purpose of a personal statement is to explain why you want to go to law school. And there's a commonality with other graduate school applications. So at the undergraduate level, we as admissions officers don't assume that you as an applicant, especially as a 17 or 18-year-old, that you are definitely going to stick with this major that you're applying as and then get this job because there are so few majors that lead directly into set jobs. Okay. And especially also at the undergraduate level, we know a large chunk of our enrolling students are not only going to change their academic paths, but they may change them radically. So you start engineering, you go into accounting, you start accounting, you go into creative writing. These are big changes. At the grad school level, on the other hand, our assumption as admissions officers is that you want to attend this program to get this degree, which leads into this job. For example, you're going to medical school to get an MD to be a doctor. You are going to law school to get a JD to be a lawyer. You are getting an MBA to work in business or to move into a different aspect of business. Okay. Um, we acknowledge you may be thinking, public interest law now and you may graduate and do criminal prosecution, and that's like within the world of law that's a big change, but like still you're going to law school to get a JD. Why? And to your end, a lot of the questions are vague for personal statement purposes, and I think there are two reasons for that, just like admissions officers being human. Part of this is there are some people where I will say the why law of their application is so patently obvious from the rest of their materials that it's not even worth saying. So, for example, someone who's worked as a paralegal at like the county prosecutor's office for 5 years. I, I feel pretty confident this person wants to go into criminal prosecution. Probably, it'd be nice if they say it out loud, but they don't really have to say it out loud. Um, those are the exceptions, though, and I guess we want to give those guys a little bit of exception. Also, the majority of law school admissions officers, we're not used to writing prompts. Like, that's not our job. Our job is to evaluate, our job is to recruit, our job is to communicate with prospective students and tell the story of our law school. It's hard to write a good prompt. And I didn't quite realize that. And then once we write that prompt is it's done. It's written in stone and we don't really change it unless we notice like I think we should have put a comma there. We'll put it on next year. Um, so it wasn't until I began in this position that I really looked at everyone else's applications because I was forced to when working with applicants and realized, man, admissions officers, we're not helping you all with this and giving you clear guidance.
I
And
just
so
I just want to say, on the off chance any of the admissions officers of any of the schools I'm applying to are listening, I would never criticize you in those ways. I think you guys are, I think everything's perfect.
but I will criticize you, and I will do that. And the next time I see you all, the next time I run into you at a law fair, or feel free, those of you who are like still friends with me and connections with me on social media, you can call me out. Okay, DM me and yell at me. But yeah, we don't do a great job. Other than there are a handful of schools, and the one I use as the exemplar is Harvard because their personal statement prompt is really direct. Why do you want to go to law school? Why do you want to pursue law? How does this fit with your ambitions, goals, vision for your future? Boom, so clear, direct. So I'm glad that we cleared that revelatory one, or that we explained that one for the audience. Because you're right, I think a lot of them believe that the goal is it's more like a cover letter and explain why you're ready for this, or I want to hear about how you've overcome a challenge or displayed the skills that lawyers need to have. When really, I just want to know why you want to go to law school. That's it. 2 pages, double space, 12-point font, good to go. Times New
Well, I
Roman.
think that is a source of a lot of confusion for a lot of people. And speaking of sources of confusion, I would be remiss not to mention sort of the source of admissions confusion, which is Reddit and Reddit forums related to admissions confusion, or admissions more broadly. The confusion comes as a side dish. And I
Yeah,
think
I
those
think so.
contexts are very like, and this is something I wanted to raise, but a lot of students have a lot of trouble understanding like where information is and where good information is. And like even individual schools have disagreements about what they're looking for in the
Yeah.
personal statement or what they're looking for in the resume. And knowing kind of how to titrate out the right amount of this place's information or that place's information involves a judgment call that has facts behind it that a lot of students just don't have. I know I didn't have it.
Yeah.
And knowing kind of what's credible is really, really difficult.
So to that end, maybe another question is like, I've heard this on Reddit. Is this true?
Mhm.
Um,
We get that every week. Yeah.
I have found historically, and I've used Reddit as a resource even when I was a law school admissions officer. I would read Reddit, the law school admissions subreddit, kind of like the headlines. What's going on in the law school admissions world from the student perspective? What are the things that they're concerned about? But also, you all are telling me when other schools are releasing decisions. You're telling me scholarship awards. I can kind of suss out what everyone else is doing. It's very useful in that regard. Um, so the funny thing with Reddit is that the cast of characters changes every year, right? And there are some legacy Reddit posters who stick around and who are kind of like the wise guides, the Gandalfs of this whole process. But the roster changes every year, but the concerns really stay the same. And it's really not the blind leading the blind, but because I do think the Reddit tiers as a whole have all the pieces of the puzzle. They just don't necessarily put them together in what I would say would be the right way. And not because of anything bad, but just because they're trying to figure this out from the outside as opposed to knowing things from the inside. And also, as someone who worked on the inside, to your concern about like you hear this from this admissions person, this from that admissions person, I will duly acknowledge that for many topics, if you sat a bunch of us on a panel, you would get slightly different variations of answers. However, I think what I try to do is my advice is more whenever I sit in on an admissions committee. So we're actually in the teeth of reading applications. What were the things that my admissions readers, my faculty, my student services, my career services people, what was the consensus that they were looking for and the consensus concerns they had? You know what I mean? And so, for example, the why law personal statement. Does everyone have to write law? No. Like, there are exceptions to the rule. But if my career services if you don't write about law and my career services person doesn't understand why you want to go to law school, they're directly saying, "I'm gonna have a hard time getting this person a job." Right? So that's where I'm coming from. And from the audience standpoint, from our listeners, I don't know, listen to my podcast. Like what's the best resource? Like triangulate. I think ultimately triangulate. I think do ask questions, do talk with admissions officers. And for Reddit purposes, and use it more as the headlines, especially when people are reporting. I got an interview request. Michigan put me on the wait list today. So you can see the waves of law schools reaching out to people. You can see waves of decisions. NYU is starting to issue scholarship letters. That's where Reddit is really, really, really useful to understand that. But when you start to go into people's personal theories as to what folks are trying, what admissions officers want to see, or how admissions officers act, especially at this time of year, we're probably going to start seeing posts pretty soon about why haven't admissions officers given me a decision yet? Someone else who applied later than me, they've gotten a decision. My status hasn't changed in a while. What does that mean? And people will chime in trying to assuage fears when really what's going to happen is it's going to cause more anxiety. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, I
yeah,
do think like there is a lot of great information on there, a lot of correct information, but yeah, sifting through it and filtering kind of the material that's useful and that it is accurate to the reality of the situation can be really, really difficult. I know I read a lot of that stuff when I was first starting out with my applications, and it was, uh, I mean, it's contradictory. There's a lot of material in there that disagrees with other material, and it's ultimately, it's the opinions of other people that are in similar situations. Um,
sorry,
not to
guys.
say that well,
Sorry.
no, again, I just I don't mean to kind of rag on the field. I love
Yep.
the subreddit. I've read it a lot of times, but like you know, it's hard to know what's real. Kind of a hall of mirrors situation.
Yep.
Um,
And meanwhile, we're all the admissions officers are listening in too.
of course, you
Yep.
got the wires.
Okay. What's up next?
Um, Well, the other statements that we get a lot of questions about are the optional statements.
Yeah.
Every school, well, most schools, give you the opportunity to fill out optional essays on one subject or another that has to do sometimes with why you want to go to that school, sometimes with something related to your personal background or your kind of lived experience. Oftentimes, they'll give you something that's like, specific to their kind of what they care about a lot as a school,
Yeah.
and and I guess a big shocking revelation for me is that you said those optional statements, and bear with me now, are optional.
was gonna
Is
say,
that correct?
what's my tagline? So of my many taglines that I don't have because I think that they're witty, but just because I have to have certain things to say to fill in certain moments. Optional is optional, but optional is an opportunity. And what that means is, as an admissions officer, if I wanted to make something required, like I would just when constructing the application, there would be a little checkbox there. See, this is why it's so good to be on video now because I instinctively make a checkbox. But when this was audio, you wouldn't see that. But now there's so
You have
much
to
more.
verbally describe the checkbox like an old timey radio.
Exactly. But now, okay, so I'm making this application. I've written this question. LSIC will ask, "Do you want to make this required?" If yes, check. If I wanted to make it required, that's all I would have to do. Okay, but I didn't make it required. And so, and I think this is also where you sometimes do get a disconnect with other admissions officers, especially at law fairs. And what I'd offer you is consider the setting of a law fair in September, October before we start reading applications. Because in those settings, I think admissions officers really do encourage people, like, take advantage of these optional statements. And I also encourage people to take advantage of them too. But now, when you start reading applications, you never you I never wanna get upset with someone for submitting an optional document, but if when I read your optional document, you don't actually say anything substantive, it likely would have been better if you had just not said anything at all, okay? Because I read a great personal statement from you that really was so on point about why you wanna go to law school. It ties in with your resume. I'm really excited about things, and then I get to our optional "why us" statement, and it's just fluff. Or you took, like, one paragraph and expanded it out to one page, and I'm not quite sure exactly what we're talking about here. Um, and in that case, yeah, the optional was optional. You didn't have to do it, guys. And I'll also flip it back to the students from reading Reddit. It seems like there's so much anxiety, and I wouldn't say bitterness, but like uh, students think this is a mind game of they say it's optional, but we know it's not optional. So I did it for you, and now it's not good enough for you. Like, whoa. Trust me. In November and December, I know I said, hey, take advantage of this in August. In November, December, though, I'm trying to read these applications and trying to get admissions offers out the door. I just want to get to know you. I want to get to learn more about you. And so sometimes that can best be accomplished just through your application form and personal statement. It doesn't have to be that additional statement too. Though again, it's an opportunity. It is there if you want to take advantage of it. And I think this is also especially true for those optional statements that are really challenging for people of your age, 26, 25 years old and younger to answer. Things like, tell us about your reflections and experiences with ethical leadership. Like, most 22-year-olds don't really have something substantive to say about that because they just haven't lived long enough. Or tell us about a time when you had an agreeable disagreement with someone and changed your mind. Clayton, what's the next topic you got?
Well, thank you for asking, Jake. I thought that the next thing it might be valuable for us to talk about is, well, we're just moving down the line here. We finished
Yep.
up with statements. I think now it's probably time to talk about resumes, which are something that a lot of students are baffled by,
What are they
because
baffled by? I'm shocked by this. What's up?
you haven't noticed that we get a lot of
No, I
questions
mean, I know
about.
we get a lot of questions about it, but okay, but from your standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the selection of things for the resume, I think, is the
Mhm.
thing that a lot of students get made uncomfortable by. We have a lot of questions from students who have a lot of material for their resume, but are being asked to cut it to one page, and they don't know what they should be picking. For
Oh,
me, it was shocking to learn that I should be putting a lot of emphasis on my educational background, which I guess makes sense because I'm going to a law school. But I am not supposed to put as much emphasis on my professional background, which happens to be in law, right? I mean that it is an educationally focused resume, is something that I guess didn't really occur to me and didn't seem like it occurred to a lot of our students when they were writing their resumes.
Yeah. Okay, so if I can riff off that. So first of all, is there there's this notion that it's gotta be a one-page resume. And I think that really comes from 2 things. One is that, the Yale Dean of Admission, Miriam, in her
Shouts out
podcast.
Miriam,
Yep,
fellow podcaster, a colleague of ours.
shout out, friend of the pod?
Into the pod, friend of the pod. That's right. Yeah.
Hopefully, hopefully. And her and, Christy at Harvard have had a really great podcast, which to their credit, I think has really, dispelled a lot of myths. I think they've been very open about the admissions process, and I think that that's to their credit, and it's been a wonderful resource. I will also acknowledge, though, that Yale in their, in their information sessions and in their communications makes a very clear one-page resume. And because they have these other sections of the application where you can expand out what you've done in more space. So they treat the resume as greatest hits, just one page that. And because Yale says that, that carries a lot of weight and a lot of assumption in the minds of applicants. Well, if Yale says this, surely this is what everyone else wants too. Where my thought has always been, it's totally okay. Some people have a page and a half resume. Some people have 2-page resumes. So there's one reason for that. The other reason why you may hear more, yeah, one-page resume, keep it tight, is because we also, kind of like I was riffing on with the Y School X statement or the optional statements, it is more common to see people take a one-page resume and expand it into 2 pages versus someone who has cut something really substantial from the resume because they felt like they had to keep it down to 1. So the former is much more common than the latter. And for those 2-page fluffy resumes, it can then be challenging to figure out what's the actual substance here, because you have to sift through things a little bit. But as far as format goes, yeah, we want education first, that's just a bit more what we're used to seeing. And then to that end of it being more educational versus professional, we're not using this to hire you for a job. So you don't have to tell us everything you've done at every job for us to ascertain whether or not you have the skill set appropriate to go to law school, because students and lawyers can come from any academic and professional background. I'm more curious to know, if you graduated in 2021, I want to create your professional timeline going forward from that date. What have you been doing since then? What can I imagine you doing as a law student and as a potential lawyer? And that's different from telling me things like you are proficient in Excel. That's not. I'm not going to give you spreadsheets to do, or pivot table master. Like, God bless. That's great. Um, but that's not necessary versus, like, again, knowing what did you do during undergrad, organization wise, because I can suss from that what you may be involved in at the law school setting too, and in our student community. So I find that shocking that you find that shocking.
Yeah. The other thing
Say
that's sort
what?
of what?
Say what?
Say what? That is how I
There you
felt.
go.
What? The the other thing that I found kind of surprising was that a lot of the resumes that I read, um, the sort of ones that were made available, you mentioned Yale, and Yale runs a very tight admissions office, and their admissions office offers materials for students, sort of exemplar. Here's a resume we really liked. Check it
Yep.
out. A lot of the ones that I read on there to sort of get ideas for my structure was they had a section for like special skills or like hobbies or like
Yeah.
interesting facts about as a sort of a funny section right at the end to
Yep.
kind of humanize you. I was shocked by that. I have never included such a thing
No
on one of
humanity.
I'm nothing funny, nothing, no silly business, extremely serious resume, black and white, no color, just
Yeah.
here's the stuff I've done. Not that my resume would have a particularly engaging special skills section. I don't know that Yale would care that I'm a moderately rated chess player or whatever, but like that was
You'd
interesting
be
to
surprised. Well, but also to that end, we sometimes miss. So admissions officers want to be helpful, and Yale gives those exemplars. Harvard has some sample resumes on their website. Michigan actually takes you through their application and explains what they're going for on different questions. It's because we want to be helpful, but we also have to recognize when we provide an example, we were meaning it to be helpful to you to identify certain qualities we're looking for, but we also have to recognize you may interpret this as this can be the only thing we're looking for. And it can then be confusing. Like in the case of Harvard, they have 3 sample resumes on their website, and there are commonalities to them. They're easily scannable, identifying personal information at the top, education comes next, etc. But yeah, like some people have experience, some people have professional experience and volunteer experience, some people have leadership. There is no right and wrong way to break this up organizationally. And sometimes people really seem concerned about that. Where from my standpoint, again, my primary concern is I want to create a timeline from when you graduated, or if you're about to graduate, if you're a current senior, my then my primary concern is, so what have you done during undergrad? What organizations have you been a part of? What academic work have you done? What you do during your summers? That's all I'm going for there, guys. It's nothing too crazy.
Mhm. And I think this dovetails with a sort of a general enlightening I've had during the process of working with you and working here at Seven Sage, and sort of watching a lot of applicants go by and reading about the stuff the admissions officers say, is that, like, coming into this, I felt like like for lack of a better phrase, I felt like the admissions officers were kind of out to get me. Like they were looking for whatever reason they could
Yeah.
find to toss my application out because they've got to review 7,000 or 10,000 of these things. And they just want to get past them as soon as they can. And that these smaller errors in formatting, right? If I structured my resume a little wrong, or my personal statement maybe was not as possessed of linguistic felicity as it might have been, or if I didn't include an optional statement, or any of these little things that might be counted against me, and we'll get to this in a minute, but maybe I took the LSAT too many times, right? Something like that. Is
Yep.
that a reason that the admissions officer is just going to go, look at this moron, and then light the app on fire and toss it out? That was kind of the intuition I had at the beginning, was that the application officers were reading a lot of these things and that they had kind of a feeling of, I mean, it's a lot of familiarity, and with it, in my mind, came a bit of contempt. And I think that over the process of working here and speaking to a lot of admissions officers, it seems like it's the opposite. And that the point of the resume and the point of all of these things is to kind of give them an excuse to accept you. Like they kind of want to let you in, I guess.
Right.
And they don't really care about these really small things.
Okay. So say what? Um, yeah. In my, and I think I can speak for most admissions officers, like in our ideal world, the first X number of applications we read would be all perfect and all admits. And then we would just be like, we're done. It's Halloween. Boom. Everyone's waitlisted from here on out, and it's fantastic. But we know that's not going to be the case. We're going to see the admits come in waves and spurts, but we open every application with the anticipation and the hope that it's someone we admit. We get more joy professionally and more satisfaction out of admitting people than out of waitlisting or denying people admission. And I will duly acknowledge, I mean, there are days when you're punchy because, for whatever reason, maybe personal reasons, or maybe you've read a couple applications in a row where things just fell flat or the tone. It's less errors. I'm okay with errors. Sometimes I get more short with tone, meaning the presumption that oh gosh, there are some people whose applications you read, and when you get to that specific why school X statement, you almost get the impression that this school is beneath the applicant. And this is the safety school, and we should be pleased to admit you. It's like, no, we have our professional pride. But minor errors, okay? Even up to and including, I mean, certainly I've offered admission to people who mistakenly wrote at the end of their Y School X statement, and that's why I want to go to Georgetown. And I was not the director of admissions at Georgetown. I was at Notre Dame. But if the content of the document is on, the things they said are true. And I know you're replying to 5, 10, 15 schools, and mistakes can happen, and, 1 or 2 or 3, it's not a big deal, it's fine, if the rest of the application is good. Heck, I may say, "I hope he made this application to Georgetown," and then maybe they'll deny him, and he'll end up here. Works out for
Mhm.
me. That'd be awesome. But no, we're looking
Maybe
for
the one he
admit
sent to
you.
Georgetown said Notre Dame at the bottom.
Well,
Mm,
exactly,
Might have
exactly.
been might
So,
have been a
yeah,
mix up.
but we'll take you. That's fine by me. But no, we, especially as a profession, I certainly noticed over the years, I'm one of the more reserved members of the profession. Like, when people get together for conferences and for law fairs and what have you, it's very collegial. Everyone's hanging out all the time. I'm simultaneously an extrovert and an introvert, so I'll hang out professionally, but then after 5 guys, cool, I'm gonna go back to my room, go to the pool, see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Everyone else is hanging out, and I think that that notion of collegiality, extroversion extends into the evaluation of applications too. They want to admit people they're excited at the prospect of knowing these are people who are going to be here. But I don't know. Is it this applicant? Is it applicants tomorrow? But these are people who are going to be here starting in August or September, and I'm going to follow their careers. And that's a really professionally cool thing. So we're not looking for reasons to deny you, but we also know we can't admit everyone, which also stinks. And that's part of the Faustian bargain of working in admissions is that with that great power also comes the realization of you're going to hurt more feelings than you're going to make people happy.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of interesting the shift in perspective that I kind of had over the course of this process. And I've spoken to a number of other applicants. I have a bunch of friends that are applying to law school as
Yeah.
well. And the sort of feeling at the beginning is often like, I have to write these essays. I have to put together this resume. I have to finish all of this. These are hurdles that are set up for me to trip on,
Yeah.
basically, right? These are,
This
these
is
are
a video game and this is level 1, and then I'm gonna
right,
beat the
exactly.
boss at the end of level 1, and I advance to level 2.
Right, right. And it seems like, the sort of realization and the reality of the situation is that these are not opportunities to fail, they are opportunities to succeed. They are sort
Yep.
of places where you can show that you are the type of applicant that a school wants, and that's how they're being looked at, right? And so a I guess a weak resume is sort of a, oh darn, that sucks. Well, let's look at his statements and see if his statements are really, really
Exactly.
good, right? And like that I think helped assuage a bit of my concern, made me feel like the guys who are going to be reading these things are not necessarily, trying to get me.
Exactly. Clayton, to that end too, for our audience, this is also the hiring process. So, as someone who has served on hiring committees, who's been a hiring in charge of a hiring process, I want to hire someone. I have a job, and man, right now we have people who are filling the gap there and not doing what should be the real job. I want to hire someone. I would live for this position to be filled. I am interviewing everyone with the expectation and the hope that you are the one, and I hope I have too many people who are qualified. Okay. But when I begin the process, I'm thinking, I hope we find one, just one, and it's similar to the admissions process, okay, in that you all may not realize we want to hire you, we want to admit you. So what we then respond to really well is just confidence in you knowing who you are and what you want to achieve, and then us figuring out, is that the right fit for what we have? And if it's not, that I mean, that stinks, and that never hears it's never feels good to hear no. But we also know you're going to go rock out somewhere else, and we're going to rue the day. I mean, that we denied you because you're going to be great. So again, same. You're going to go through the same thing for hiring. Like, please, someone just hire me. Well, meanwhile, the hiring people are like, oh, please, we just want to like fill the summer associate class so bad. And we want we w- it'd be awesome to have some really tough decisions.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's a perspective that I think is radically different from that of the person who is naively applying, and certainly different than the perspective you see online among applicants commiserating about the
Absolutely.
right. Um, okay, well then I feel like we can shift gears a little bit to talk about the test,
Okay,
the
go for it.
LSAT students are worried about. Um, the thing that really shocked me, apparently, if I cancel a score, you guys still see that I canceled it, right? It's not like
Yes,
it just gets kind
it's
of
not
turned to dust,
it's not
right?
erased. So again, uh, video podcast erase. Now you get so much more depth to this, right? Yeah. Now to that end, so just to clarify, let's say you took the August 2025 LSAT and then you canceled it. What some applicants think is that I will never see a trace of that August 2025 LSAT. It's gone. What admissions officers will actually see, though, on your CAS report is August 2025, and then they will see a C for cancel next to it. But now, that doesn't mean anything because pre-score preview, pre-COVID, back in the 100% live LSAT days, the only way you could cancel your LSAT was to cancel at the test center on test day. And so you would only cancel if you knew something went completely sideways. Classic examples being you got sick during the LSAT or there was a real big incident at your test center, like someone next to you getting sick. And you would have to go up to the proctor and tell them, Proctor, my name is this, my LSAT, LSAC number is this, I am canceling. So it was rare to see cancels. Okay. Post COVID, LSAC really adopted score preview, especially when they figured out they could monetize score preview. And now, in this day and age, almost everyone has one C. It's really not uncommon to see two cancels on people's score reports either, just because it's much more common. And from an admissions perspective, we really don't mind one or two. That happens. And especially with the online era, there's just more opportunities for things to go wrong, like proctor issues, tech issues, water bottle issues. Trying to think what else. Person in the room with you issues, but then you tell them it was your cat and they need proof that it's your cat, etc. Um, so we really don't blink at those cancels. And at the end of the day, we're taking your highest LSAT. So that's what I'm looking for is, okay, he took it 3 times, cancel 168, 167. Cool. He's got a 168. Move on.
That was also shocking to me that that schools seem to kind of, well, I don't know, if you have like 5 takes of the SAT on your record, the schools are going to be like, huh, why did he take the SAT so many times? But the idea that schools will focus on your highest
Yep.
LSAT was kind of surprising to me. I get that that's the median report thing, but
Yep.
still.
So okay, and to that end too, um, at least my experience, I used to work in undergrad admissions too. And granted, that experience is now over a decade ago. But in general, it was really rare to see someone take a standardized test more than 3 times. And part of that though was your scores weren't reported to us automatically. You had to contact the ACT or the SAT to report those scores to us. So theoretically, you could have taken the ACT 4 times and the SAT once, but you got a great SAT score. And if you didn't send those ACTs, we would never know about it. Okay. That doesn't happen in law school admissions because LSAC automatically sends your LSAT to us. Right. Um, but I think even acknowledging that possibility with undergrad, people just don't take the SAT and ACT 4 or 5 times. That happens a bit more at the law school admissions world, probably because too, as a high school student, uh, the majority of people are applying for or for undergrad during senior year. So you have a clock and that clock runs out. And then it's like, I guess that's the best I did on the SAT. Cool, I got to apply to college, as opposed to law school where your clock is 5 LSATs in 5 years. And so if you don't like your score and if you feel like you have more time, hey, Clayton, what do our tutors say over on the tutoring side of things? Like, oh no, I'm not hitting my benchmark. What should I do?
You should take the next one because that's available, right? I mean, there's no punishment
Exactly.
for waiting until April. Um,
Exactly. Other than, well, that means you're applying next year, probably, because an April LSAT is too late for admission during this year's admission cycle. So you can also get a little bit of a competing or conflicting advice from the LSAT wing of Seven Sage and the admissions consulting wing. I know we do work together. We just acknowledge both of our realities, which is admissions wise, we also want you to do as well in the LSAT as possible. But yeah, like the January, February LSATs are the latest ones you can take and be considered for this year, as opposed to the tutoring perspective where it's like, yeah, April,
yeah,
cool.
just do it next
See,
time. It's no big
we'll
deal.
see you in April.
I do think that was, you know, one of the big shocking things about law school admissions for me that I thought I was misreading when I first read it was the concept of a rolling admissions process. Um, which again, you may take perfectly for granted as somebody who's been in the sphere for 20 years or something, but like, I don't know of any other. When I was applying to undergrad, it surely was not a rolling admissions process. There was a day when everybody got their letters, right?
Yeah. And so to that end, undergrad admissions, there are a lot of schools that do rolling. Okay, but they tend to be more public schools or less selective schools. There are many more schools at the undergrad level, though, who have effectively early action, early decision, regular action, regular decision. There are 2 times per year that we will notify people of admissions decisions, typically one in December, let's say roughly December 15th, and then one sometime in late March, like Easterish time. So March 30th, April 1st, right around there. And those are the 2 times that we send out decision letters. To that end, Clayton. So this may be what you're like you've repressed, but you've just let it out a little bit. For example, there are cohorts of undergrad schools that coordinate when they issue decisions, i.e., the Ivy Leagues.
The UCs do this. So for those of you who know who I am, you know that I went to UC San Diego, and UCST released its admissions decision on the same day as UCLA. I remember I got those 2 letters on the same day.
Clayton, I'll take this up a notch. I'll take this up a notch. The Ivies coordinate not only the day, I'm pretty sure they coordinate the time, which I do think at the end, though, because applicants know this, it probably works
Mhm.
out better for everyone. I used to work primarily with international applicants for a period, like high schools in Korea, China, Japan, Singapore. Um, so the the decision release for Ivies happens in the afternoon, evening, Eastern time and Pacific. So that way everyone's home from school. You don't have to worry about people freaking out at school. However, 8 in the evening Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific is 8 in the morning in China or 9 a.m. in Korea. So you have potentially an entire high school of people flipping out. Oh, oh, it got ugly fast.
Yeah, that
So
sounds terrible.
right. So it's the little graces. So in case you're like, wow, law school admissions, this stinks. Let me tell you about that. Now, on the law school side of things, the only school that really holds to that model is Harvard, where Harvard, at the beginning of every admission cycle, they post on social media and on their website, here are the 3 days on which we're going to issue admit decisions. There's one in January, one in February, one in March. Bam, those are the 3. Every other school, though, really does operate on a rolling basis. And they may think of themselves as more people sometimes equate rolling as chaotic, and it doesn't have to be. So, for example, Michigan admits every Wednesday once they start making admit offers, typically the first Wednesday in November. But then it's going to be clockwork other than holiday weeks and things like that. U Chicago, Yale, they start admitting in January. But if you go back in the past, you'll see like, yeah, and they admit once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, once a month. They're still really regular. Um, but they're moving in a systematic basis. And so they will have reviewed, and here's a key difference in a world of unrolling admission, as an undergrad admissions officer, there were people whose applications I read in October, and I said, admit, but we're not sending out that decision letter until December. So we have time to analyze our admit group and maybe adjust it and maybe say, like, oh no, we've admitted too many people, so we need to pull back on some of those admits. And you would never know that we pulled back on you, for example, right? Law school admission rolling means that decision's out the door. And once it's out the door, I can't take it back. So if I'm Michigan and I start admitting in November, I need to feel confident that these people I'm admitting in November are not people I'm regretting in March. And or I simply have to accept this is how life goes. And I cannot live life with regrets. So YOLO, and let's just admit them. Um, that also changes things. Again, as opposed to the Harvard law method, which is 3 dates. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I was sort of thrown by that whole process because it's so radically different from the undergraduate experience, at least at the schools I was applied to, admittedly.
And Clayton, here, the undergrad model too, you're going to get in a decision letter around early April. Okay. In that letter may be waitlist. Okay, but you've received its decision. You're on the wait list. I will duly acknowledge in the world of law school admissions with deadlines in February, March, and April, um, you may not get an initial decision until June. And I won't name schools. I won't name names. You guys can go to Reddit and check out the past and find out names of schools. But yeah, schools technically, I mean, sure, they want to admit people early enough so that admitted students can make an informed decision on whether or not to attend the school, so we have time to recruit you. On the flip
I have
side,
time to tell my girlfriend what state I'm gonna be moving to. That's sort of a big one for me.
yeah, man, it's funny how you need to plan your life. Funny, funny. Um, but that's different too. That and law school admissions officers aren't trying to do anything nefarious there. They're just taking their time deliberately. They may be holding on to a certain cohort of applicants as like a soft wait list or anyway. That's very different from undergrad. And people interpret that as mind games. I would interpret that more as law school admissions offices are vastly understaffed.
Probably. Yeah, I think that the sort of overwhelming feeling that I've gotten from the other applicants that I've spoken to is this sense of sort of like Damoclean dread at this whole situation that like, you don't really know until you know, and you don't know when you're gonna know. It's not
Yeah.
like with these where you in undergrad at least, where I could circle a date on the calendar and say, okay, I'm getting my letter from UCSD, accept or deny, it's gonna be this day, right? And I
Mhm.
know that. And I can kind of stop thinking about it till then. You know what I mean?
I'm guessing there's also a generational aspect, and this may be more for me to understand from you, okay? That, pre probably 2015, certainly pre-2010, it was mostly undergrad admit decision letters. So everyone just kinda knew, I'm gonna get a letter in the mail at some point, and it's probably gonna be roughly the last week of March, 1st week of April. In our new digital world, this is not like an old man yelling at clouds or complaining about things, but we expect more immediate feedback. We expect that if I order something from England for Christmas, it's gonna get shipped out in 2 days. I'm gonna get a tracking number. I'm gonna be able to see that thing, and that just doesn't quite happen.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that a lot of the sort of experience of undergraduate admissions was done digitally, and that like I don't know, I did get those letters by mail, but I also got them by sort of digital delivery, right? And I would get a little email that said, and I knew the date was the email. There was a
Yeah.
couple schools I think I got a letter from, but I think it was mostly by
Yeah, back in the day, we could hide behind being vague, like, "Oh, yeah, late March."
checks in
And
the mail.
yeah,
It'll
yeah,
get there when it gets.
check the
Nope.
postmark. Yeah. Well, so Clayton, on that note, we've been going for probably about 40, 50 minutes or
Mhm.
so now. So tell you what, I think we need to break this into like a two-parter, and we'll just have you back on the pod at a later time to cover a couple
Okay, we,
more.
we have covered a lot of the material I wanted to discuss. I mean, I'm
Oh,
happy to keep
perfect.
going, but over time if you like.
I
Yeah,
was
sorry.
giving you a way to save face here. Thank you so much, though, for joining us today on the podcast. We really appreciate it. So, hey, on that note, we're going to wrap things for today's episode. So, again, Clayton, thank you so much for joining us. All the best on your law school applications, most importantly. And for our audience, thanks for listening and watching. And until next time, we wish you all the best on your law school applications.